Okay, welcome to our channel once again. Let's get into this. This is the second part of the Renters' Right Act 2025. That is 27th October 2025. We're coming back into this video. There was a previous video, but this is a slightly more detailed video of the previous one. Reason for making this video is that the date is getting closer. And so we all know that the way that laws are passed, they are normally developed as a bill. So you would have had a renters' right bill for a very long time that goes through a lot of debate in Parliament, in the House of Commons, and also in the House of Lords. And then finally, it gains royal assent. Then it becomes an act, a law that everyone in the nation must abide by. And so the Renters' Right Act has been ongoing for a little while. And it is there to address some of the issues that the Housing Act 1988 brought on tenants, which was very detrimental to a lot of tenants. Basically, the nearly 13 million UK tenants or people in private rented accommodation in the United Kingdom. And also, in a way, it was benefiting at least about a sort of 2.3 million landlords who were then renting to these private tenants. And so it was the Labour government manifesto to actually bring this act into life so that, you know, the millions of people that are in the rental market get protected. And why is that? The reason is that in the UK, it is known that, private rental, the accommodation offered by landlords in the UK are probably the least affordable, probably in the whole European Union. Obviously, we are not in the Union, but we are, in a way, Europeans. And also, the sort of the quality, they have the rather most poorest quality housing and also the most insecure housing system here in the UK. And this is why the Labour government made it a point to make sure that in this term of their office, they will ensure that this renters' right bill be turned into a law. And so that has actually happened. And so when these laws are enacted, this was done, it passed royal assent on the 27th of October 2025. But there is a date that these laws come into effect. And so from the 1st of May 2026 is the date that this Renters' Right Act really kicks into force. And this is why this video is being made in advance, so that people that are in the millions of people in Britain that are in rental accommodation may now research this area to ensure that their rights are not abused by rogue landlords. And so here we are, the Renters' Right Act. This is what we see on official government website. It says Renters' Right Act 2025 will fundamentally change the way in which private landlords let property in England when the tenancy reform comes into force from the 1st of May 2026, making sweeping changes to the Housing Act 1988 and other legislation. So we go on further, just a brief. So it says that the Act resets and intervenes in the contractual relationship between landlords and tenants, regulating every step in the tenancy life cycle and increasing penalties for landlords and letting agents who break the new rules. This practical guide explains the 12 key provisions in the Renters' Right Act 2025. So yes, obviously we encourage anybody in private rental accommodation to look into this. So I have actually prepared a very short presentation which goes through this act, what it means. And so the key aspect of this Renters' Right Act, number one, is to abolish Section 21. So Section 21, what is it? Section 21 is the no-fault eviction, right? And so we say here that significant changes to the private renters market. What is the effective date of the act, which is 1st of May 2026, and what are the key changes? So here we start off with the no-fault eviction. This no-fault eviction was actually in the Housing Act 1988, and that has been abolished. And so one will say, what is the no-fault eviction? So I'm going to switch in between screens and then obviously take it from the horse's mouth here. So we see here the no-fault eviction is a notice used by landlords in England to regain possession of a property from assured short-term tenants without providing a reason. And so this has been the problem where, landlords could literally just come in, give you 2 months notice and evict you from a property. Why was this happening? For example, if the property that was being rented was in a very poor state, where you have properties that are mold infested, properties with, cracked walls, properties with walls, basically ceiling leaking, ceilings. We know of stories of where ceiling collapses on families. Maybe properties with very poor, bathroom settings, kitchen settings, and just properties that are, one will say, not up to the standard for rental. If you found yourself in such a property and you try to get the landlord to do something about it, there would have been other people also looking for this same property, and therefore the landlord may then just kick you out without any specific reason. And so this is what is the no-fault eviction. The second item that this act comes to address is periodic tenancy, which has been introduced. So there's a periodic tenancy introduced so that there is no more fixed term tenancy or assured short-term tenancy. So most people that have come into the rental market over the years knows that what was given to them by the estate agent was the assured short-term tenancy. Now, what does that mean? What it means is that once you sort of sign up to this sort of a tenancy agreement, you were most likely locked in for 12 months. And so within that 12 months, if something was to happen and you wanted to move on, you will then have to, let's say if you move in 6 months, then potentially the landlord will come after you for the remaining 6 months. Even if you did not live in the property, you had to pay this sort of money. And we also know that even in students' accommodation, this was also very prevalent, whereby they go into this tenancy agreement, and then when they are probably having a vacation of 3 months, even though they may choose not to stay in that accommodation, but they still have to pay the landlord even in their absence. And so this new act brings an end to that situation. And therefore, what it means is that for the periodic tenancy, which has been introduced under the Renters' Right Act, you will basically rent the property, and it's just a continuous. You remain in the accommodation, and as and when you give your notice, say your 2 months notice, either way, then you could then move out, and you didn't have to owe the landlord any money, as you did not live in the property anymore. The landlord could also serve you the 2 months notice for you to leave. Then the next one is the new notice rule. So you have a 12 months before possession, and then you have a 4 months notice to sell. So this is also to do with possession, that once again you could easily be then served with a possession notice previously, and you had to basically leave the accommodation, or you will then be taken to court, and they will enforce for your removal from that property. And so what the Renters Right Act does now, it actually gives the renter a 12 months possession notice. So the landlord will have to give the tenant a 12 months notice so that they know well in advance and that they are able to plan and prepare where to go next. And so then also, if there was any notice to sell previously, they will just come in and just notify you that the property is being sold, and that literally get ready and move out. And normally they would have expected you to do this within a month, but in this new law you have 4 months notice to sell that needs to be given by the landlord to the tenant before anything could happen. Then we have the mandatory PRS registration, landlord to register, register with the landlord ombudsman. This is a compulsory registration plus fees. So the landlords are required to basically register their name and their property, the rental properties, with the landlord's ombudsman. So that this is basically keeping a database. We know in London that there are numerous properties, the major players are actually renting property through management companies, which most of the time they really do not disclose who the landlord really is. And so the question here is, will this section which says mandatory PRS registration, landlords to register landlord with the landlord ombudsman as a compulsory register, is this thing going to be a situation where in landlords that do not have sort of a huge housing stock will then be required to do this? What happens to the major players, those with the high rise properties in Canary Wharf and all these fancy places in London? Will this same rule apply to them? Because this is a question. This, I personally do not know how this is going to work out, but indeed nobody is above the law, and that major players should be treated the same as obviously small players in the rental market. And so these major landlords are also required in a way to disclose, but whether they will or not, we do not know. Will they lobby, which is what they are very good at? They may lobby the government and have concessions. And so this is something that obviously it will be good for one to know what a government stance is. Then the next one is decent homes standards, so higher property standards. This is known as the Awaab's law. So this is a very good thing. Number one, it's a good thing for the nation as a whole. When I say that, what I really mean is that if you have properties that are neglected and used for rental, and landlords are taking money without really looking after these properties are no good for whatever communities that they may be in. And so this new law, which obviously we have the Awaab's law under it, which calls for decent home standards, is a good thing for the nation as a whole. It's a good thing for communities, and it's a very good thing for the renters, because then one will now realize that if they are paying their rent, which rent comes as a substantial part of anyone's income, disposable income. So on average, people in the UK are probably spending in the region of 50 to 70% of their incomes on rent. So it takes the largest chunk of their disposable income. And then therefore, at least if they pay that sort of money and the properties that they are in are of a very high standards, then that really does make sense. Then the next one is rent increase limits. So this is also being tackled under the Renters Right Act 2025. So under this new law, there is a limit at which a landlord could increase the rent of tenants. In the past, landlords could increase rents probably at will and at any amount as they did wish, as a way of pushing tenants out of their property. And so all this has come to a stop. And so what we are going to see in the future is that the increment is once per year, and also a 2 months notice needs to be given before the landlord can actually activate this rental increment. And also the rental increment must also be in line with the rental market average. Then the next thing on the line is a ban on rental bidding wars. So there's a ban on accepting offers above advertised prices. And so you will notice that for most of the time, when if one wanted to rent a place, it has been a practice for a number of years now, where the estate agent will take a lot of potential renters to one particular property, and then unfortunately these potential renters will start outbidding each other, and therefore they may then end up, let's say, assuming that the landlord wanted, say, £600 for that property, the landlord could end up having something like £800 per month for that property, because the renters were then able to outbid each other. So the one with the highest amount of money then takes the property. Now this works also for the agent that was renting this property on behalf of the landlord, because they charge a fee that may have been based on the as a percentage of the rent that was being taken by the landlord. So this was something that was encouraged in the rental market. But now this new law practically stops that. And so landlords are only allowed to take the advertised price for that particular property, and that price should be public information. There shouldn't be anything hidden about it, so that one cannot find a situation where they get outbid from a property. Probably the one thing that is not listed here that could also be mentioned is that there is also room now for pets, because in the past that has also been an issue whereby somebody could be rejected from renting a particular property of their choice based on the fact that they had a pet. It could be that maybe they are the ones that have met all the relevant criteria that the landlord wanted, but the mere fact that they had a pet, the landlord could easily reject that. This law once again deals with that aspect, and so that is also going to be looked at, and whereby you cannot just be thrown out or refused based on the fact that you had a pet. And there's also the private rent sector landlord ombudsman. So the landlord ombudsman, which is, well, we've sort of mentioned that here. I think we mentioned the landlord ombudsman in the section where we say the mandatory PRS, but in reality there will be a private rent sector landlord ombudsman who will look into any disputes between the tenant and the landlord. This is a very good thing on the basis of going through the normal courts, legal procedures, the cost of lawyers, and even the speed, the turnover of cases has been something that has been very challenging for the UK courts. So already the UK courts are so inundated with cases, and so this private rent sector landlord ombudsman will be the one mediating on all disputes in relations to the in relations to the anything related to tenancy. And so they will look into it where there is a problem of an eviction, an unlawful eviction. They will look into it where there are issues of unfair rental prices or rental increments. They will be looking into it. If somebody should evict somebody, on the basis of a property being notified of being put on the market and they don't, these are all things that the ombudsman can look into it. So it is better for all tenants to use the ombudsman rather than using someone else, or obviously rather than going to the court. And so we come to the next one, and then we see what it means to landlords and property ownership. This is the new Renters' Right Act. What does it mean to landlords and property ownership? So what is being said here, obviously, is not, we don't know that that is what will in reality happen, but it is predicted that there will be a potential mass selling of housing stock. So we know that in the UK, some part of northern England, that on a particular street, one person owned about 600 properties on that street. So these are the type of landlords we're talking about. With the changes that are coming, landlords may complain about these changes just because they've had it so good under the Housing Act 1988. They've had it so good for so long. And so these changes that really brings the landlords and the tenants on a level playing field will surely make a lot of landlords uncomfortable. And so this is why that prediction of the selling of housing stock is a very likely thing to happen from the 1st of May 2026. And so the impact of that will then lead to an increase in the housing supply increment. So you get an increment in the supply stock of housing. Then the next thing is also the potential drop in the value of UK housing or private investor inflow to retain UK house prices at its current value. So what we are trying to say is that when you have a lot of supply come in, two things are likely to happen. One is that the supply will then outweigh the demand. It's just purely for the one will say it may not respond. There will be some sort of inelastic demand response to this increment, the potential increment of housing supply stock. The reason is that house prices generally in the UK are so relatively higher than incomes that the market, basically the demand market, may not necessarily sort of move positively towards the increment in the supply, obviously the potential drop in the price because the prices are so high. So what I mean by saying that is that, for example, typically if you should go back 25 years ago, the average income was about maybe four or five times, sort of the house prices was about 4 or 5 times the average income. But now the average house price in London is about maybe 16 to 25 times the average income. And therefore, even if the supply of housing stock increases and the prices drop, demand may not respond to that drop in the value of UK house prices because people may still not be able to qualify for mortgages because of the differences between their income and the asking price of properties. So this is one analysis. The other analysis is that there may not necessarily be a potential drop in the value of UK housing stock. The reason is that we may also find either one, the major players with big monies move in to buy up the stock that are being freed by the small players, which then obviously keeps prices at the same level. You may also have a situation where, foreign investors may also come in, depending on the laws that the government is put in place. Foreign investors may, with money, may then come in to buy up, the mass, selling of the housing stock. They may buy it, which then keeps the prices there about the same. Then there is also the issue about first-time buyers, and so assuming that the house prices, once again, supply stock increases and prices sort of takes a slide there, then first-time buyers may also be able to raise money from their parents and stuff to actually fill up in buying up that extra stock. So this is what may potentially happen. So what do we say here? We say property businesses cannot be viewed from a passive income lenses approach. So that is also an interesting one. So we in the UK, we see this constant advertising about, bring your money in, come and invest in properties, the best thing, blah, blah, blah. You can do it passively as you work. But this may not be the case anymore. With the new laws in place, property investment business is more or less becoming a full-time business, because there will be a lot for the landlords to do, i.e. in terms of them keeping their properties up to scratch, staying on that register of the ombudsman, landlord's ombudsman, being able to maintain, higher standards. There will be a lot in it, and also staying abreast with the laws and the changes may not make this business such a passive business anymore. And so people have to be very much aware of this. Landlords must become more responsible, provide higher standard rental property. So this is a spin-off from what was mentioned before, that there is a greater responsibility on the landlord to provide higher standards, being the AWAB's law. Then finally here, there's a disproportionate power landlord exercise over tenants, the disproportionate power landlords exercise over tenants are over. The big players may swallow the small players. And so, yes, this is basically, this law creates that level playing field for tenants and for their landlords. And so that power that the landlord had before, from the 1st of May 2026, this power should be gone. They should now look at tenants with respect and see them as an equal partnership in business. So this is what is likely to happen. But the question here is that how much noise is being made about this act? This is a very important act. Obviously, it was a Labour government manifesto, and they have indeed actioned this act. So potentially speaking, there should be a lot of noise made about this Renters' Right Act for everyone in the country that is in the rental market to know what their new rights are. And I am making this video as part of this movement that will help people to know what their rights are, what the changes are, and how beneficial that is to them, and also be in a position to challenge their landlords if the accommodation that they are in are no good properties. So we say here what it means to tenants. So tenants' security in their rental accommodation. So what it means is the tenant security. So we know that the reason why this Rental Right Act came into force is the fact that the tenants were so insecure in the accommodation that they lived in because of one, the no fault eviction, which is now going to disappear. So this is a great benefit to the tenants. And also the next thing is the no more fixed term assured short-term tenancy is also gone. Now it's a periodic tenancy system, and so once again the tenants will be feeling very secure. Advance notice to sell or move gives tenants more time to plan to move on. So this is also a very good thing. Tenants can demand higher standards of the accommodation they live in. And so this section is basically, this is the reason why the 13 million or so tenants, private tenants in the UK must know this act, because this is the benefit. This is what they can demand. Tenants can seek redress on disputes from the private rent sector landlord ombudsman. Then there's no unexpected rent increment, once per year, 2 months notice. Then there's also tenants cannot be bid out on the advertised rent price. No more bidding wars. And so the price that is displayed as a rental price for a property is the price that all tenants should pay. If a landlord is known to do otherwise, then they could be brought to the private rent sector landlord ombudsman. Then the next thing is tenants can enjoy stability and comfort at their accommodation. So because of all the new notices, and the fact that if they have to move on, they will not be paying any rent, any sort of rent which was in the past based on a fixed term contract. That is not going to happen anymore. Renter can enjoy a balanced relationship with landlords where the law is concerned. And so there you go, is the level playing field. That is what is going to happen. And so all the landlords should be ready for this. So the date that this is starting is the 1st of May. So we're going to make a lot of noise about this date, that all renters, anybody in rented accommodation, must share this information with their friends so that all renters are aware. The likelihood, what may also happen, will be the fact that the major players may still have some sort of concessions where they can basically hide behind management companies. And so this is something that we also advocate, that the government can actually look into it and treat everybody the same, whether they are a large landlord or a small one. They should all face the same law and be required to do the same thing. And so no landlord, whether they are big or small, should be able to hide their identity behind a management company. They need to expose their identity so that everyone knows who owns what. So is there a national campaign for the 14 million plus people renting to gain awareness? This is a question. Then the smaller landlords may sell and exit the market. Can the ordinary tenant challenge the major faceless players who operate under management companies? Or is the law going to force landlords to register with their real name? So these are all obviously additional questions in relations to this Renters Right Act of 2025, which is coming into force on the 1st of May 2026. There is a lot to digest in the coming months. So See you again as we delve a bit deeper into the contents of the Renters' Rights Act. Feel free to add your comments. You may be a landlord and may not be happy with the changes. Please politely say what you think is not fair about this act, Renters' Rights Act. You may be a tenant that have been living under a very poor accommodation. You are insecure and your property is not even affordable to you. Let your comments be known. How do you feel about this new Renters' Rights Act? Are you going to commend the government, the Labour government, for putting this in place? Because we know that when the Tories were in power, they were in power for a very long time. And this Housing Act 1988 operated all the way. And potentially, this is what has brought us where we are today, where a lot of families are struggling in the UK to make ends meet. The reason is that rents are high. Utility bills, water bill, electricity bill, gas bill, telephone bill, internet bill, the list goes on. Council tax, you get tax on your food, tax on fuel. You pay so much out of your disposable income that at the end of it, you have nothing left. We live in a global world, a global community where other countries, even China, a nation that we sometimes say so much, probably we don't say much good things about, are probably living lives better than lives here in the UK. And so this is the question. Why aren't our governments putting in place measures that will help people to have a little bit more disposable income so that they are able to have holidays, they are able to live decent lives, they are able to get themselves educated, and they are able to build a life that can basically compete equally with other nations? This is also a question. So thank you once again for watching this channel. Definitely add your comments and contributions. And until next time, we will see you again. Probably in our next video, we may probably look at the ongoing wars between America, Israel, and Iran, and how this is affecting the whole world. Thank you.